You don't overthink because you think too much. You overthink because you react too much. Not just to what happens, but to what might happen, to what people say, to what they might be thinking, to what your mind keeps repeating, long after the moment is gone. A small comment stays in your head for hours. A simple situation turns into 10 different versions in your mind. A random thought becomes something you feel like you need to solve. And every time you react to it, you give it power. That's the part most people never see. They think overthinking is caused by having too many thoughts. But that's not true. It's caused by treating every thought like it matters, like it deserves your attention, like it needs a response. And the moment you respond, you're already inside it, building on it, expanding it, turning something small into something that feels real. This is how you lose control. Not all at once, but slowly, through reaction. The same way people can control you. By triggering your emotions. Your thoughts control you. By triggering your reactions. And if something can trigger you, it can control you. It doesn't matter if it's a person or just a voice inside your head. The result is the same. You lose your focus. You lose your clarity. You lose your peace. But there's another way to live. A way where thoughts don't pull you in. Where people don't get a reaction out of you. Where your mind becomes quiet. Not because there are no thoughts, but because you stopped responding to them. And that is where real control begins. Not by controlling everything, but by choosing what you refuse to react to. Think about how this actually plays out in your life. Not in theory, but in small, everyday moments that seem insignificant at first. You're talking to someone. A normal conversation. Nothing intense. Nothing important. And then later, a thought appears. Maybe I said something wrong. That's it. Just one sentence. But instead of letting it pass, you go back. You replay the entire conversation. Every word. Every pause. Every expression on their face. You start analyzing things you didn't even notice in the moment. Why did they say that? Why did they pause there? Did their tone change? And now your mind starts filling in the gaps. Maybe they judged you. Maybe they didn't like what you said. Maybe you came off the wrong way. And suddenly, your body reacts. Your chest tightens. Your energy drops. Your mood shifts. But here's what's actually happening. Nothing new has occurred. No one said anything. No situation changed. The only thing that happened was a thought, and your reaction to it. That's it. The thought was small, but your reaction made it real. This is how overthinking starts. Not with a problem, but with a reaction to something that isn't even happening anymore. And it doesn't stop there. You send a message. They don't reply. At first, it's nothing. Just time passing. But then your mind steps in. Why haven't they responded? And instead of letting that thought pass, you stay with it. You check your phone again. And again. You start creating explanations. Maybe they're ignoring you. Maybe they lost interest. Maybe you said something wrong. And now something simple turns into anxiety. Not because of reality, but because you reacted to a thought and kept feeding it. The same thing happens with the future. What if this doesn't work out? Now your mind builds scenarios. Failure. Rejection. Things going wrong in every possible way. You imagine conversations that haven't happened. Outcomes that don't exist. And your body reacts as if they are real. Stress. Pressure. Tension. But nothing is happening. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And still, you react. And that reaction creates the experience. This is the pattern. You don't get trapped by thoughts. You get trapped by following them. By answering them. By trying to solve them. By treating them like something that needs your attention right now. And the more you do that, the more your mind learns that this is important. So it gives you more doubts, more questions, more things to think about, until it feels like your mind is out of control. But it's not. It's doing exactly what you trained it to do. To react, to engage, to keep going. You're not being controlled by your thoughts. You're being controlled by your reaction to them. And until that changes, nothing else will. There is a simple principle behind everything you're experiencing. A principle most people hear, but almost no one truly understands. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." At first, that sounds straightforward, almost obvious. But when people try to apply it, they misunderstand it completely. They think it means controlling their thoughts, stopping negative thinking, eliminating doubt, forcing their mind into silence. So they try to fight their own mind. They push thoughts away. They argue with them. They try to replace them with better ones. But the more they do that, the worse it gets. Because now they are not just thinking. They are reacting to the fact that they are thinking. And that creates a second layer of noise. Frustration, resistance, pressure. This is why control feels impossible. Because you are trying to control something that was never meant to be controlled. You cannot stop thoughts from appearing. Just like you cannot stop clouds from forming in the sky. They come and go on their own, without asking you, without needing permission. A random memory, a sudden fear, a strange idea that makes no sense. All of it appears automatically. And none of it is the problem. The problem begins the moment you react, the moment you treat a thought like something important, something that needs your attention, something that needs a response. Because that's the exact moment you step into it. You stop observing, and you start participating. You start asking questions. Why am I thinking this? What does this mean? What should I do about it? And now the thought is no longer small. It's growing. Because you are feeding it with attention, with energy, with focus, and your mind responds accordingly. It gives you more thoughts, more variations, more scenarios, until it feels like your mind is working against you. But it isn't. It's working exactly as it was trained to work. To expand whatever you engage with. To repeat whatever you react to. This is the shift Stoicism points to. You don't control what appears in your mind. You control what you follow. You control what you respond to. You control what you give your attention to. And that changes everything. Because now the goal is no longer to stop thinking. The goal is to stop reacting. Instead of saying, "I need to get rid of this thought," you begin to say, "I don't need to follow this." That one shift is the difference between being trapped inside your mind and being free from it. Because when you stop reacting, the thought has nothing to hold on to. It appears, and then it fades. Not because you forced it away, but because you didn't feed it. And over time, your mind begins to change. Not by becoming empty, but by becoming quiet. Not because there are fewer thoughts, but because fewer of them are being followed. And in that space, something new appears. Clarity, stability, control. Not control over your thoughts, but control over yourself. And that is the only control that has ever mattered. Your attention is the fuel of your mind. Whatever you focus on grows. Whatever you engage with expands. And whatever you ignore slowly fades away. This is the rule that governs everything happening inside your head, whether you're aware of it or not. Most people think attention is passive, something that just happens to them. But it isn't. Attention is a decision. And more importantly, it is an investment. Every time you give a thought your attention, you are feeding it. You are telling your mind, "This matters." And your mind listens. It takes that thought and builds on it. It adds detail. It adds emotion. It adds urgency. Until something small starts to feel important, and something important starts to feel overwhelming. This is how overthinking grows. Not because the thought was powerful, but because your attention made it powerful. Think about how it actually happens. A thought appears. What if this goes wrong? That's all it is at the beginning. Just a sentence. But the moment you focus on it, you start asking questions. What would happen if it fails? How would I deal with it? What would people think? And now the thought is growing. Because you're feeding it, giving it more attention, more energy, more time. And the more you feed it, the more it demands. More answers, more thinking, more focus, until it takes over your mind completely. And now it feels like your mind won't stop. But it didn't start that way. It became that way because you kept returning to it again and again and again. This is the part most people miss. They think the solution is to fight the thought, to argue with it, to prove it wrong, to fix it. But that still requires attention. And attention is what keeps it alive. Even resistance feeds it. Even frustration feeds it. Because your mind doesn't care why you're focusing on something. It only knows that you are. So it keeps producing more of it. More of the same thought. More of the same pattern. More of the same loop. This is why trying to control your thoughts usually makes them stronger. Because you are still engaging. Still feeding the cycle. So the shift is simple. But not easy. You stop feeding it. Not by force. Not by suppression. But by withdrawing your attention. A thought appears. And instead of following it, you leave it alone. Unanswered. Unresolved. Unfinished. At first, your mind will resist. It will try to pull you back in. It will tell you this is important, that you need to figure this out. But most of the time, you don't. Most thoughts are not urgent. They only feel urgent because you trained your mind to treat them that way. And when you stop responding, something changes. The thought doesn't disappear instantly, but it doesn't grow either. It just sits there and slowly loses energy, like a fire that is no longer being fed. And the more you practice this, the more control you regain. Not by controlling your thoughts, but by controlling your attention. Because in the end, your mind follows your attention. And if you learn to guide your attention, you no longer have to fight your mind at all. So how do you actually apply this? Not in theory, not when everything is calm, but in the exact moment a thought tries to pull you in. It starts with something simple. Not control. Not suppression. Just awareness. The moment a thought appears, you notice it. That alone is already a shift. Because most of the time, you don't notice. You react automatically. You're already inside the thought before you even realize it. So the first step is to slow that down. To catch the moment a thought begins. It might be a doubt, a fear, a memory, something like, what if I made a mistake? Instead of following it, you pause. Just for a second. That small pause is where your control begins. And then you label it. Just a thought. That's it. No judgment. No frustration. No need to fix anything. Just recognition. Because the moment you label it, you create distance. You are no longer inside the thought. You are looking at it. And that changes everything. Now comes the part most people struggle with. You don't continue the conversation. You don't answer the question. You don't try to resolve it. You leave it unfinished. This feels uncomfortable at first. Because your mind wants closure. It wants certainty. It wants an answer. It wants to feel like the problem is solved. But you don't give it that. You let the thought stay unresolved. And instead, You bring your attention back to something real. Your breath, your body, your environment, what's actually in front of you. At first, the thought will come back. Of course it will. Your mind has been trained to repeat what gets attention. So it will try again. And when it does, you repeat the same process. Notice, pause, label, let go, again, and again, and again. This is the practice. Not once, not when you feel like it, but consistently. Because overthinking is not a one-time problem. It's a pattern. And patterns are broken through repetition, not force, not intensity, just consistency. Every time you don't engage, you weaken the habit. Every time you don't follow the thought, you take back control. And slowly, something begins to change. The gap between thought and reaction grows wider. At first, it's almost invisible, a fraction of a second. But over time, it becomes space. Enough space to choose. Enough space to not react. And inside that space, you realize something important. You were never forced to follow your thoughts. You were just used to it. And now, you're no longer automatic. You're aware. You're deliberate. You're in control. Not of what appears, but of what you respond to. And that is where real change happens. Not when your mind becomes silent, but when you stop reacting to everything it says. Overthinking feels like control. It feels like you're doing something useful. Like you're preparing. Like you're staying ahead. Like you're protecting yourself from what might happen. But if you look closely, you'll see something else. Overthinking is not control. It is the illusion of control. Because what are you actually trying to control? The future. Other people's reactions. Outcomes that haven't happened yet. Things that are, by nature, unpredictable, uncertain, and completely outside your control. So your mind does the only thing it can. It simulates. It runs scenarios. Again, and again, and again. What if this goes wrong? What if I fail? What if they judge me? And for a moment, it feels like progress. Because it feels like you're doing something. But you're not. You're just looping through possibilities that don't exist. And the more you do it, the more your mind believes that uncertainty is dangerous, that it must be eliminated, that every unknown needs to be solved before you can move forward. And that belief is what traps you. Because uncertainty never disappears. There is always something you don't know. Always something you can't predict. Always something you can't control. So your mind keeps working, trying to close a gap that cannot be closed. And in the process, it exhausts you. This is why overthinking never leads to peace. Because it is built on resistance. Resistance to uncertainty. Resistance to not knowing. Resistance to reality as it is. But peace comes from something else. Not from solving everything, but from accepting that you can't. Accepting that things might go wrong. Accepting that people might misunderstand you. Accepting that outcomes are never guaranteed. And once you accept that, your mind no longer needs to simulate everything. Because you are no longer trying to escape uncertainty. You are allowing it. And that changes everything. Because now, you don't need every thought to have an answer. You don't need every situation to feel safe. You don't need to mentally prepare for every possible outcome. You can move forward without resolving everything in your head first. And that is real control. Not controlling what might happen, but remaining stable no matter what happens. That is the shift most people never make. They try to control life instead of learning how to stand steady inside it. But once you see this clearly, overthinking loses its purpose. Because you no longer need it to feel safe. And when you no longer need it, it begins to disappear on its own. Now imagine what your life looks like when you stop reacting to every thought. Not perfectly, not all at once, but slowly, more often than before. Things begin to change. Not dramatically, not overnight, but quietly. Conversations feel lighter. You're no longer replaying every word after it ends. You speak, and then you move on. There is no constant need to go back and analyze what you said, what they meant, what might have happened. That loop begins to break. Decisions become clearer, not because you suddenly have all the answers, but because you're no longer stuck in endless hesitation. You choose, and you move forward, even when uncertainty is still there. Because now, uncertainty doesn't stop you. It doesn't pull you back into overthinking. It's just there, and you keep moving anyway. Your energy begins to return. You're no longer spending it on thoughts that lead nowhere, not wasting hours inside imagined scenarios, not carrying conversations in your head that never actually happened. And that energy starts to show up in your life, in your focus, in your work, in your presence. You become calmer, not because life is easier, but because your mind is no longer fighting itself. There is less noise, less pressure, less internal tension, pulling you in different directions. And people notice it. They feel something different about you. Not louder, not more aggressive, just steady, grounded, unaffected by small things that used to control you. You don't rush to react anymore. You don't feel the need to explain yourself to everyone. You don't chase every thought that appears. And because of that, you carry a different kind of presence. A quiet stability. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything. The kind that doesn't get shaken easily. This is what real control looks like. Not controlling every thought. Not eliminating doubt. But no longer being controlled by them. You still have thoughts. Of course you do. But they don't take you with them anymore. They pass. And you stay. And in that, there is freedom. Not loud. Not dramatic. But real. The kind of freedom that comes from no longer being trapped inside your own mind. And once you feel that, even for a moment, you realize something important. You don't need to fix your mind. You just need to stop following it everywhere it goes. You don't need to control your thoughts. You don't need to eliminate doubt. You don't need to force your mind into silence, because that was never the real problem. The problem was that you believed every thought deserved your attention, that every doubt needed an answer, that every feeling had to be followed. But now, you see it differently. A thought appears, and you don't chase it. A doubt shows up, and you don't build on it. A feeling rises, and you don't let it take control. Not because you are forcing yourself, but because you understand that you don't have to react. And that changes everything. Because the moment you stop reacting, your mind begins to slow down. Not instantly, not all at once, but gradually, naturally, without pressure, without force. The noise starts to fade. The loops start to break. The constant tension you used to carry begins to dissolve. And what's left is something most people spend their entire lives chasing. Clarity, stillness, peace. Not because life is perfect, but because your mind is no longer working against you. And from that place, you move differently. You think less, but understand more. You react less, but feel more stable. You say less, but carry more presence. This is the quiet kind of power most people never develop, because they are too busy trying to control everything, instead of learning what to let go of. But now, you know the difference. You know that not every thought matters. You know that not every reaction is necessary. And you know that your peace depends on what you choose to engage with. So the next time a thought tries to pull you in, pause, notice it, and let it pass. Not everything needs your attention. Not everything needs your energy. And not everything deserves a reaction. The version of you that is calm, clear, and in control is not something you have to become. It's something you return to every time you choose not to react.